Welcome to Crime Most French, a fortnightly podcast covering intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Alliance. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
This is episode 74, The Shadow Killer. Marcel Barbeault is accused of 8 murders in the 70s in Nogent-sur-Oise, a small town north of Paris. Today, he's one of the oldest prisoners in France with no hope of ever getting out.
Well, if you kill 8 people, then no, I don't think you should be roaming the streets.
Yes, and he's 81, I think, or 82 now. He is probably the oldest by now.
Yeah.
But yes.
I think the jail system isn't quite as harsh as perhaps the supermax prisons in the US. I think living conditions are a bit better.
Yes. Mid-January 1969, a woman enters the police station in Creil. It's a small town north of Paris. She's Thérèse Adam, or Adam in English. She asks to talk to the commissioner, and she tells him, "Mr. Commissioner, you have in front of you a dead woman." So he's a bit surprised.
Ooh, is she a ghost?
Yes. She explains that she thinks someone is going to kill her. She feels observed in her house and followed. And she knows someone is watching her every move, and she's sure the purpose is to find the right time to kill her.
Is she Sting?
Sting?
Every breath you take?
Yes, she can't really explain much more than that.
But she definitely has the feeling that somebody's watching her.
Yes.
She's under surveillance all the time.
So the police doesn't know what to do with it, because it's not every day that you have someone that comes in to report their future murder, but at the same time not telling you anything specific about it.
Yeah, also, it does tend to lead to you sounding nuts.
Yes, exactly. So they just thought she was another nut job, and they didn't take her very seriously. On the 24th of January 1969, a retired train driver is walking his dog along the train tracks.
Dog walker.
Of course it was a dog walker.
Yes.
That's their job. He discovers the body of a woman.
Oh no.
The body is that of Thérèse Adam.
Oh no.
46.
Oh no, I feel terrible for saying she's a nut job.
She is partially naked, on her knees and her face on the ground. She looks like her body was staged in that position. She has been shot at the back of the skull, Carter style. And her face is damaged. The cops think that maybe she was beaten first, but they're not entirely sure.
Dear.
It's obviously not natural death. And as France is not Detroit, murder by a gunshot is a rarity, so it kind of is a big thing.
It sticks out.
Yeah.
Oh, that poor woman.
So she was right.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm an awful person. Okay.
She lives nearly next door. The police discovers that she had been killed the previous evening, as she has been parking her car in her garage. Nobody saw or heard anything.
Oh no.
But it wasn't the first recent murder in the area. 2 weeks earlier, on the 10th of January 1969, at about 7 p.m., Françoise Lecron is in her kitchen. She's just got home from work, and she's married to one of the vice directors of the local Saint-Gobain factory. They make glass, like your car in France most likely has Saint-Gobain windows.
Oh, I see.
I think they work in the US as well. Her husband is not home yet. It's January, so by 7 p.m. it's pretty dark outside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not night, but it's pretty much there. She doesn't switch the lights on to avoid being blinded by the lights. And you can just about see her silhouette from outside. She's in the middle of doing some dishes because she had some dishes to finish. And she hears a pop at the window and then a very sharp pain in her shoulder. She falls to the ground and she's clearly in pain.
So, Hank, she was doing the dishes in the dark?
Well, it was darkish. I've done that before. You don't want... Lights are painful, so do dishes in the semi-darkness.
How can you tell if they're clean in the semi-darkness? I don't approve. Always do your dishes in the daylight, peeps.
So she manages to crawl to the phone and call the police. When they arrive, they discover a puzzling scene. Françoise had been shot 6 times
Holy crap.
with a .22 long rifle. And we talked about those before in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Everybody had one of those. She was very lucky because she was hit only once out of 6. And it was a fairly minor injury to her shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, she can't really help the police much because she hasn't seen, heard, or anything apart from the pop of the first bullet. And that's it. She doesn't remember anything specific. And nobody can think of why someone would want to kill her. At some point, the police wonder, is it a revenge against the company because her husband was a vice president? Maybe. Is it something in her family? But they can't figure out what it would be and who it would be. So there's just no sensible explanation, so that goes nowhere. Then on the 14th of January, Michel Jouvet, who's 17 years old, is shot as she's walking in the street. The bullet hits her in the stomach. She's wounded, but she survives. And unfortunately, once again, she can't tell anything to the police.
This feels like kind of like random snipers. This is crazy.
It does, yes. And we're still in January. That's three people shot in January already.
Wow. It does feel like downtown Detroit.
Yeah. So the bullet is extracted from François' shoulder and Michel's stomach, and it's a 5.5 millimeter, i.e. a .22 long rifle bullet.
Right.
The tests show that it is the same rifle that fired all the shots.
Same lands and grooves then.
Yeah. 3 women don't know each other. They have never met. They had no reason to ever meet because they were completely different part of society.
Yeah.
One was kind of low bourgeoisie. One was a kid, 17. And the other one was a housewife. So they had no reason to ever have met. So the cops have no idea how they can be connected.
So it's a bit like the Washington.
Yeah, but yes.
The guy who was driving the sniper around in the boot of the car, and they were just taking out anyone.
Yeah, but that feels that way because they just can't explain why the same guy with the same weapon would shoot these women, and they have absolutely nothing in common.
The only thing they have in common is they have ovaries. That's it.
But they live in the same town.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Then the police remembers they have heard of Thérèse Adam before because she came to report her future murder.
Yeah.
Of course, at the time they didn't take it seriously, but then suddenly they thought, oh, shit. She told us it would happen.
Yeah. I hope they were feeling as embarrassed as I was.
Well,
if not more so.
At the time, she had said that the likely killer was her neighbor's son.
Right. And
they had quickly looked into it, and he was in the army and posted in Africa.
Right.
At the time.
At the time,
yes.
So there's no way it was him.
It was absolutely impossible for him to have been there and done it. So that's why when they quickly looked into it, they decided, she's in that job. It's not even possible that it's him. So now they're thinking, okay, maybe she was wrong on the person, but maybe she knew something.
Yeah.
But of course now she's dead, so they can't ask her questions. One thing the police were sure about is that they had a serial killer on their hands.
I'd say so.
And it's very rare in France, and it's even rarer a serial killer using
a gun.
Weapons. Yeah. At most they use knives, but they don't normally use guns.
No.
So it's extremely rare. Now, I've seen interviews with one of the cops involved in the story, and he said at the time they just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It made no sense to them. Normally, gunshots is an accident.
Yeah, gunshots are normally in hunting time.
Yes, exactly. It's an accident. Not 3 women in the same town in like 2 weeks.
That stands out like a sore thumb.
Oh yeah, they didn't know what to do with it because it made absolutely no sense to them.
Yeah.
They're confirmed in their assumption that they have a serial killer on their hands on the 16th of November 69, so at the other end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
A man wearing a fisherman raincoat, like in I Don't Know What You Did Last Summer, and a red scarf on his face enters a house in Nogent-sur-Oise, same town.
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne Mérienne, who's 44, and her daughter, Micheline, 19. Micheline is such an old name, even at the time. My grandfather's sister was called Micheline. But anyway, they're home that evening, and the man makes the 2 women leave the house at gunpoint, guides them towards the train tracks, and when he reaches an embankment, he separates them. He takes Susan, the mum, away from the daughter. Micheline runs away. She doesn't wait and manages to reach a neighbor's house and raise the alert. When she comes back to where she last saw her mom, she discovers that the man had tied her up, shot her in the head with a bullet in the temple, and that was a .22 again. She describes to the police a huge man, and a photo fit is created. Weirdly, not by a police sketch artist, because they didn't have one. So it's a local newspaper artist that does the
cartoons?
Yes, exactly. That does the photo fit for them.
I shouldn't laugh.
She describes him as having almond eyes, like a cat.
Right.
So she essentially describes a boogeyman. But the photo fit is still distributed to newspapers, TV stations, and everywhere they can.
Yeah. So anybody who has a red scarf or a waterproof.
Yes, but that pretty much covers everybody.
Pretty much.
This time, the serial killer left a bag at the scene.
Oh, he's getting very sloppy. He's
Yes.
left a witness and
Yes, exactly.
evidence.
Yes, but a witness only saw his eyes, so...
Mm.
It was made of fabric, like tartan, and it contained a purse and several .22 bullets. The bag is shown door to door in the area. The cops go with the bag and show people and say, "Oh, do you know that bag?"
Check out my tartan bag.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even exposed at the town hall, and people in the town are told, go and see the bag and see if you recognize it, and they do. So there's just hundreds and hundreds of people coming to see that bag.
I hope they're not touching it.
But nobody...
Oh, mind you, it's the 70s.
Yes, the 70s, they've already done it. And one of the journalists at the time who covered some of the cases said that the police was just walking everywhere. At some point, there is the gendarmerie involved. We'll talk about it in a minute. And he said there was about 40 gendarmes walking around the crime scene soon as it happened. So
totally contaminated.
Oh yeah, it was totally ruined.
Dear.
So it was the 70s. But nobody recognizes that bag.
Mm.
Well, nobody comes forward.
I mean, if you're a woman in that town, you must be terrified.
Yes.
I mean, clearly you're not safe anywhere. It's not even clear off the streets.
Yes.
In darkness, it's the guys actually just breaking into people's houses and shooting them.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In fact, the bag was recognized.
Mm-hmm.
It was recognized by some workers in the Saint-Gobain factory we talked about before.
Yeah, the glass factory. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It looks a lot like one used by one of their colleagues to carry his lunch.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Marcel Barbeault. His nickname The Tall, because he's
tall.
quite tall and he's an ex-boxer, so he is huge. So she was right.
So she was right there. But
well, if it's him, she was right in the description, yes.
Well, does he have almond eyes? That might be the clincher.
Yes. Only one person talks to the police at the time, but the sergeant on call, who receives the person at the police station, doesn't follow up and doesn't write a report about it, and it gets lost.
Oh, for God's sake.
So somebody probably knew who it was, reported it, and it got lost.
Oh my God, that's really bad. Please say nobody else dies.
We'll see.
Ugh.
The press nicknames the serial killer the Shadow Killer because he seems to only act at night or when the weather is really bad, hence the raincoat.
Yes. The press are very, very keen on giving
Oh yeah, of course.
murderers nicknames.
Yes. And despite being in the news for a while, the inquiry is going nowhere.
Except it's not though, is it?
But at the moment we don't know. On the 9th of January 1970, so it's a year after the first murder, a man commits suicide by jumping in front of a train. He looks a bit like the photo fit of the serial killer and is being reported by his wife to the police.
Right.
Because he looked like the serial killer to her. He had been arrested, questioned, and let go by the police. The police also found a bag near him containing plaster dust. And that reminds them that the bag they found, the tartan bag, contained plaster dust.
Plaster dust is in gypsum's quite common.
But yes, that's the thing. It is fairly common. But there's two bags that they find.
Yes.
And the guy kind of looks like whoever they're looking for. So at that point, most of the population thinks, yeah, okay, that's him. He committed suicide. We're done. We're good.
And we all lived happily ever after. And that's the end of the podcast.
Yes, exactly. The police still checks a little bit because they're not entirely sure that's the right guy. So they check mental institutions, hospitals, and other places where crazy people might have been locked up.
Mm-hmm.
Because he hasn't killed anyone for a few months now. So they don't understand why. Why would he kill?
Yeah, why's the break? And
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But they don't find anything, anybody would match the dates or anything like that. So they just don't know. And it's after 3 years, on the 6th of February 1973, that he reappears.
Mm.
So he in fact disappeared for 3 years and 3 months. On that day, Annick Delville, 29 years old, is on her way home from her job at the local cinema, and she's hit on the head by the truncheon, then killed by a .22 at the back of the head. Execution style like the others.
So he's upped his game in terms of he's now using two things to...
Yeah. Her husband finds her dead near their house when he comes home from work.
Oh, well, that must have been so
And she was half naked. Yes.
God.
Her husband is questioned because he's suspected of having killed her in a crime of passion, because of course it's always the husband.
Yeah, it's always the husband, but this time it's not.
But the police can't make anything stick.
No.
And none of what he's done matches. It can't be him, so they rule him out.
Mm-hmm.
6 years earlier, she had been shot at. She had pressed charges, but the police hadn't found anything about it. So the case had died at the time. So now they're starting to wonder what's going on in this town. People have been shot for years and nobody connected dots, and could it be the same dude?
That's crazy.
So as this killing starts again, people get scared.
Yes.
And it's reported in the local press that women were dyeing their hair blonde because all the victims, without exception, had dark hair.
Right.
So suddenly in town, everybody was blonde.
Yeah, that's what happened when Son of Sam was on the go. Everybody was dyeing their hair brown.
Yes, to disappear. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that happened at the time.
Mm-hmm.
On the 28th of May 73, a young couple, Eugène Stéphane, 24, and Maurice van Hift, 22, were in a car park in Lingueville Cemetery. Lingueville is a tiny village just north of Nogent-sur-Oise. So
right,
not
so
the same
close.
town, but pretty much the same town.
Yes.
It's a known location for lovers, like Lovers Lane or whatever they have in the US.
Yes.
Apparently that exists here. I've never heard of it. But the cemetery, the car park cemetery, was one of those places.
Nothing says romance like a cadaver.
Like a cemetery, yes.
Slowly rotting away.
Yes, it's a bit weird.
Strange.
Their bodies are found at that location the next morning.
So how many, was there 3 of them in the car?
2 of them.
2 of them? Oh, okay. And there must have been, was there a double-barreled name?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that wasn't, right. I thought it might be a throuple, but no.
No. Unlike for the previous murders, the inquiry is given to the gendarmes because it's outside of town, so it's not the police.
Oh, right,
okay,
so they've kicked it over to the gendarmes.
Yeah. And the gendarmes decide that the case has nothing to do with other killings that have happened in the last
because there's a
few
dude,
years. Yes. Mainly because the victims are a couple. That's never happened before. There's never been a male victim.
No.
So they decide it's unrelated. So they don't treat it as one of the serial killer's victims.
Right.
They decide, okay, it's a completely different case. We'll investigate separately.
Right.
Also, what's important to remember is that at the time, there was a big feud between police and gendarmerie. We talked about it in the previous episode. The guy that was stealing the cars, that unlocked cars.
Uh-huh.
When half of his thefts were sent to the police and half to the gendarmerie, and they were shooting each other in the legs because they wanted to make it impossible for the other to solve the crime and stuff. And the guy went on for months and months and months. Well, that's the same thing. That was apparently very general in the 70s and very common.
I hope it's better now.
Yes, it's a lot better now, yes.
Mm.
But at the time, it was still happening, so that means that, of course, nothing is connected, no information is sent from one to the other, so obviously...
So we're going to have more victims,
yeah. That's not going to be solved.
Mm.
On the 9th of January 1974, Josette Routier, 29, gets home at about 7:30 in the evening from her job as a bank clerk, every day. She's the new owner of a ground flat, and there she's surprised by someone who was hiding behind the curtains. and he kills her with 2.22 bullets. Her underwear is ripped off, but so far there's been no indication of rape in any of the cases. The body is discovered by Madeleine Kill, who's her neighbor, on the 11th of January when she was walking her dog. Of course.
Of course.
She hadn't heard from Josette for a few days, and she decides to have a look in. And she has the key to her flat. But she's scared of going in.
Oh, yeah.
So she waits for her husband to come home from work, and they go in the evening. And in the flat,
and find this poor woman.
They found that woman's body. Her handbag was stolen, and the murderer left muddy boot prints in the flat, size 42, which is the most common size for men in France anyway. So it doesn't help the police at all.
So hang on a minute, he's a giant with
for small feet.
With small feet.
If it's the same dude, yes.
It's kind of like the anti-Sideshow Bob.
Yes, reverse Sideshow Bob. Yes. When she's questioned by the police, Madeleine Kill says that she had heard glass being broken at about 4 p.m. 3 days earlier, but she didn't know where it came from or what it was, so she just ignored it. And then she said she heard gunshots as well.
Right.
But didn't report it.
I mean, the thing is, if you hear broken glass, fair enough. But if you hear gunshot...
Well, we hear gunshots here because of hunting.
Yeah, but I mean, that was in town.
It's a small town, but yeah, it was a town. And
also, with the breaking glass, then surely you would... Breaking glass and gunshot, then you would think.
Yeah. But that's obviously when he went into the flat to wait for her to come home.
Yeah.
So he waited for 3.5 hours.
I mean, that's terrifying.
Yes. It's at that point that a new cop, Daniel Neveu, 34, is appointed to the case because nobody wants it. He's a kind of newbie.
I was going to say, he's a bit...
Yeah. He is young. It's his first major case.
Bit of a greenhorn.
Yes. So that's September 74. He's the one who really looks into it seriously. He's the one who connects all the dots.
Right.
Because so far, they thought they had a serial killer, but they couldn't really explain what it was and where it was going. They weren't very clever, obviously.
I mean, we're also talking about, this is the very start of the heavy period of serial killers.
Yes. Yeah, the 70s. Yes.
So, I mean, it's understandable that they didn't instantly connect the dots because, I mean, they weren't that common before then.
No, well, they were pretty sure they had a serial killer. They just couldn't understand what was going on. They didn't understand why he was killing these women, what the link was, or anything like that. They had no idea. And they didn't seem to really understand what was happening.
Yeah.
That cop...
It's more switched on.
Is way more switched on, and we'll see how he solves the case. So, but again, the murder stopped for a while, so that doesn't help things. It's only on the 26th of November 75, so we're talking another...
That's about
another
6
gap.
years.
No, we were in 74 there.
Yeah, no, from the very beginning of the story.
From the big... Yes.
69 we started,
Yeah. So now there's been another year gap or so. Julia Goncalves, 29, leaves her home in Nogent-sur-Oise at about 6 a.m. to go to work. She crosses the local park to reach the train station, like every morning. She happens to meet the serial killer, who kills her with his .22 long rifle.
I would have gone the long way round. I don't think I would have been going through parks with a serial killer.
Her body is found on the next day in a stream that crosses the park. She had been shot in the head, and money was missing from her handbag.
Bless her heart.
On the 6th of January 1926, a month later, a month and a half later, Françoise Jakubowska, 20 years old, secretary at EDF, Electricity Company, State Electricity Company, is shot dead with a bullet in the head near the train station. So now he's kind of shooting people in the street instead of waiting for them in their house.
Yeah.
So it's getting even scarier. This time the victim is also stabbed several times, and she's found naked. Daniel Neveu, the cop who inherited the case, searches for more murders in the area, thinking, okay, we know those ones, but could there be more? And he wants to see if more women specifically were killed in the last few years in that town. He also widens the search to burglaries in the same town.
Oh, right. So like an escalation.
Well, that's what he thinks. And he's struck by similarities between some details of the murders and some details of burglaries that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one of the burglaries report says that the family photos had been spread on the bed, like somebody was looking at the photos.
Right.
That has happened in Josette's murder as well, the woman who was shot in her flat. There's been other similarities as well, like for example, women clothes being displayed in the flat,
right.
Same as in some burglaries. So he's thinking...
So he's got rituals.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking that not only the burglaries and the murders are connected, but that guy has something going on.
Oh, yeah.
Some kind of fetishist thing.
Yeah. Is he an orphan? Is he,
Yes. But he doesn't know at that point, but he thinks they're very closely related. And also there's been some cases of thefts that have been reported, but for insignificant things.
Right.
During the murders and during the burglaries. So, for example, in one burglary, only a watch was taken, but money was left.
Right.
In some of the murders, also some weird small things were taken, but not the purse that was just lying there. So he's thinking that it is a murderer / burglar that collects trophies. Yeah. Which is very new at the time. Remember, the BAU wasn't really even on in the FBI in the late 60s, early 70s.
No.
So he has a very good hunch there.
Yeah, well,
without
definitely.
having been trained in any of that, because that wasn't a thing at the time.
Yeah, I mean they were in the process of starting to question all the in the US, question all of the serial killers like Red Kemper and stuff. But
but that was the mid to late 70s. So at that point, he's like ahead of them. Yeah. He has some kind of very, very good intuition that this is something that exists. Mm-hmm. So he's starting to connect a lot of things happening in that town over the last 8 years or so.
Yeah.
So he decides to make a list of potential suspects in the area on various criteria, and he comes up with a list of 150 names. One of them is Marcel Barbeault. He just doesn't know at the time who that is. But he's one of the 150
He's just
names.
one of the 150.
Yeah. One day, the police receives an anonymous phone call, and the caller tells them that the killer is 35 years old, 1.8 meter tall, married to a blonde woman, has 2 kids, no driving license, has served in Algeria, and been a boxer.
That's very specific.
And also he works in a nearby factory.
That is very, very specific.
That is so specific. Unfortunately, they don't know who that is, and they never found who called. Neveu, later interviewed by newspapers, said that to him it was Barbeault, the serial killer, that called. Because nobody else could know that much detail about the serial killer without being the serial killer.
Yeah, that's...
Like, knowing that he doesn't have a driving license, apart from his family and maybe 1 or 2 colleagues at work, who would know he doesn't have a driving license?
Nobody.
So, at the time, they don't know what to do with that, because that caller didn't give them a name. He just gave them a description.
Yeah.
So they just write a report, and that's it. They have nothing else they can do with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's all very well having a database for people who have driving licenses, but there's not a database for people who don't have a driver's license. So,
during his investigations, Inspector Neveu notices a pattern in the location of the murders. So he continues to have very good intuition.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, like this geographical pattern.
They seem to be centered around Langeville Cemetery. Remember where the couple was killed?
Oh, yes,
It seems to go round that area. And to him, that one murder in the cemetery is the one that wasn't premeditated. It just happened.
It happened, yeah.
So he thinks that is the center. Mm-hmm. And all the murders happen around the cemetery. So he thinks that the murderer, whoever he is, has a link to that cemetery. So again, he searches the area, and he finds a .22 bullet near a tap at the back of the church, which is very well hidden, and only the locals would know about that tap. Mm-hmm. So he thinks, okay, he is definitively linked to the cemetery. He knows the cemetery. He comes to the cemetery. So he makes another list. And he goes around the headstones, collects the names, looks up the names of the people living nearby, and makes a list of the common names. And he comes up with 30 names. And once again, one of them is Marcel Barbeault. Of course, there's probably more common names, but that name now appears in 2 of his lists. He questions all 30 of them. They discover, like, Barbeault's mother died in 1968 of breast cancer, and it was apparently really nasty. She had 2 breast ablations, and she died in his arms.
Oh, God. That's a stressor then, obviously.
But that's not a thing at the time. They don't know anything like that. But that is something they wonder. They wonder, okay, could it be that dude?
Yes.
Whose mum died not long before the first murder?
And he's looking at other people's families.
Yes. And that's the trigger that made him start killing people. They don't know it's called a stressor, but they have an intuition that maybe that's what's going on. So when he interviewed all 30 people, they do searches as well. And they happen to search Barbeault's house. They find a .22 long rifle and a silencer, 2 silencers, I think, in the basement. They find a fisherman's coat, and they find a number of caps, hats.
Yeah.
The ballistic analysis shows that the weapon they found is the one that shot all the people that have been shot.
Bingo,
yes. They also piece together a history of the rifle. They discover that it was stolen during a burglary years and years earlier.
Okay.
So they know where it comes from.
So he was basically a career burglar who didn't handle his mum's death very well.
It looks like it. Once they know who the original owner of the gun is, they go and see him, and he tells them that he was practicing shooting in his garden. So they go and collect lots of shells from the garden, and they compare, and they confirm that, that is the gun. It's been used before, and it's been used for the murders. So they have the whole history of that gun. So having a suspect, they can also connect murders to whenever he would have been available to make those murders, and they discover that he was off on all the days the murders happened. So at that point, they decide to arrest him.
Yeah.
So that takes place on the 14th of December 76 at about 1 p.m. It's just, they wait for him, he comes home from work, and they arrest him.
Right.
He also happens to be 35 years old, like the anonymous caller said.
Has to have been him that phoned.
We still don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever said it was them, so they don't know. And of course, the lines in the 70s weren't very good, so you couldn't. Even if they had been recorded, which probably it wasn't, you probably couldn't really compare the voices. No. It's just impossible to know.
No.
But it is very surprising that dude
that level of
knew
detail.
So much.
Yeah.
So the trial starts on the 25th of May 1981.
81? That's a...
Well, it takes a little while to wrap up everything.
I guess it's a big, huge case.
Yes.
So I guess. But it's still 4 years.
They suspect 8 murders.
Yeah.
And I don't... In 1981, I was, 6, 7? And I don't remember it in the news at all. I don't remember that story. I remember some of the other stories we covered, but not this one. But anyway, he's accused of 5 murders out of 8 because 3 of them are a bit light on evidence and they didn't want to risk it.
Diluting the...
Yeah, so they charge him with 5 and they keep 3 on the back burner.
The back burner.
Maybe they can do something with it at some point. The trial is fairly straightforward. They have quite a lot of evidence. There's really nothing he can do to get away.
So there was no shenanigans in the court?
No. It was apparently very, very quiet during the trial. He wasn't talking much. He was barely answering questions. He was... at some point, one of the journalists who covered the case said that it's like he wasn't there. So the prosecutor requests death penalty, even though he knows there's a very small chance it's going to happen because it has been used for many years. The last time it was used was 1976, and it was a kind of military trial, and it was a very complicated case. It was a child murderer in the first place, but I think he was a soldier, so it was a kind of a half military trial. It's the last time it had been used. Okay. So it had already been 5 years.
So it's that death by firing squad kind of thing?
Yeah, he was actually, I vaguely remember, he was killed by firing squad, like after a treason trial. So we can cover it one day I think we mentioned it before. He was killed in Vincennes
We've done the
castle.
last public hanging, but we haven't
Yes,
done
but that
the
was
last.
39 or 36, something like that. Yes,
Mhm.
but the last execution was 76.
Mm.
So anyway, and also it was just after the elections from 1981, and François Mitterrand had been elected president, and he was strongly opposed to the death penalty anyway.
Right.
So even if the guy was sentenced to death, he would commute his
He would have
sentence to
commuted
prison.
it. Mhm,
So there
okay.
was nearly no chance he would be executed, but the prosecutor chanced it anyway. So he's sentenced to prison forever, as we call it here. That's life without parole in the US. I don't know if there's an equivalent in the UK. That's proper life sentence.
Yeah, there's just no chance of parole. No.
You will never come out.
No.
It's just not going to happen. We call it prison forever.
Yeah.
Barbeault appeals, of course,
Mm.
and his sentence is cancelled on the 17th of May 82. And I couldn't find why, but then he's tried again and sentenced again to prison forever in December 83. He's still in prison. He's over 80 years old now, as we said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently he's the prison's librarian.
Right.
What's interesting is that Barbeault's wife had recognized him from the photo fit,
Okay.
but decided not to report him. People found that later when she was interviewed.
Right.
And also, one of his two brothers, Roger, committed suicide in 1973 by jumping in front of a train. That's just when the second wave of murder started.
So another trigger.
Well, he never explained why, but as his wife recognized him,
Mm-hmm.
the cops think that his brother recognized him, and because he was his brother, he couldn't report him to the police, but he wanted to.
Yeah.
And at some point, the only way out he could find was to commit suicide. That's what they think. But of course, he never left any letter or any explanation, so they don't know for sure. But that's what they think happened to his brother. He just couldn't find a way to reconcile his brother starting to kill again, and the fact that he can't possibly report his brother to the police to send him to jail forever, or to possibly be executed. So that's what they think happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the case of Marcel Barbeault, the shadow killer.
Okay, well, bye-bye, Barbeault. Barbeault, bye-bye.